You ever wake up expecting nothing more than your usual routine, maybe a coffee, a breath of that salty air, and the slow, quiet start of a Saturday, only to step outside and find your world's been hijacked by three strangers dragging their lawn chairs across your porch? One of them drinking wine like he owned the place and asking if the grill's hot yet. That's how my week from hell kicked off. At first, I figured I was on some reality show, or maybe I'd been pranked, until I heard that voice, the one that could strip paint off a mailbox from 50 feet away. It was Karen Lancaster, our self-appointed HOA president, strutting around in her sun hat and sunglasses, waving like she was the queen of Sea-Watch shores. She called out to me like I was her pool boy. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. My guests are getting restless. Mind unlocking the cabin so they can freshen up. And while you're at it, pull out those folding chairs from the back." 10 seconds. That's how long it took for the stupidity of what was happening to register. Karen had decided my private beachfront cabin, my sanctuary, was now hers to loan out to out-of-town friends, all without a word to me. When I told her as calmly as I could muster that the door was staying locked and these people were trespassing, she laughed it off. Told me this was part of her new community engagement program, some plan she said the HOA had voted for unanimously. Never mind that I'd never heard of it, never voted on it, and certainly never agreed to let my home become a resort. So what does Karen do? Calls the sheriff, of course, and claims I'm locking residents out of a shared facility. As her guests smeared tanning oil on my deck chairs, I realized this wasn't confusion, it was a declaration of war. The Sheriff Deputy Marsh rolled up faster than I thought possible for our sleepy coastal town. He stepped out with that look cops get when they're about to referee a slap fight at a daycare. Karen ran up in her heels, waving her hands and ranting about my coastal isolation rage, her own invention. Marsh just looked at me, asked if she was trying to turn my house into community property. And when I handed him my deed with all the original surveys and that 1998 document stating my cabin was exempt, he let out a long sigh. He told Karen and her guests to clear out if they didn't want to test trespassing laws. She stormed off in a huff, her guests trailing behind one of them, kicking over my citronella candle for good measure. I knew it was just the opening skirmish. The next morning, there was a mass email about an emergency HOA meeting on the clarification of shared amenities code for how do we take this guy's house. Within hours, rumors flew: property access disputes, non-compliance, you name it, even Paul. My neighbor, retired allergic to drama guy who only leaves his house for hedge trimming, texted me to ask if Karen had really tried to take my house. He didn't follow up with words, just a laughing emoji and a dumpster fire gif. That about summed it up. At the meeting, Karen was front and center in her neon blazer, preaching unity and the equal enjoyment of the beach. When she not so subtly referenced my disruptive interpretation of community property, I called her out, asked if she meant giving out keys to my cabin and calling the cops on me. The room snickered. Karen didn't. She launched into a speech about needing better bylaws and moved for a vote to let the HOA manage underutilized beachfront properties. It passed 11-6. Karen smirked like she'd just crowned herself. But I came prepared. Out came my big manila envelope, original surveys, deed exemptions, plus a notarized letter from the developer confirming my property's exclusion from HOA claims. The room went dead silent. Karen tried to recover, said they'd need time to verify, and that misinformation is dangerous. I pointed out the notary stamp and fresh signature. Meeting adjourned fast. But that night, Paul showed up at my door with a note. One of the board members warning me Karen planned to push a retroactive amendment and accuse me of misleading the board. That's when I knew it wasn't just about property or unity, it was about control. Karen wanted ownership of the whole story, the optics, the rules. She wanted the neighborhood, and if I didn't stop her, she'd eventually hand out my bedroom key. So I fought fire with fire. While Karen waged her campaign of unity with glossy newsletters and veiled threats about selfish property owners, I started digging. Conversations with the town clerk led me to a little history. Karen had only moved here 3 years ago after a suspicious community garden scandal in her last HOA. That sent me down a rabbit hole. Property records, old newsletters, forum posts from her previous neighborhood. It all pointed to a pattern of missing funds and creative interpretations of HOA finances. I put it all together in a binder, wasn't looking to start a war, but I sure wasn't going to lose one. Karen's next move. Orange flags and spray-painted lines all over my property, a laminated sign declaring the start of a beautification initiative, shared benches, and a path right through my deck. I called the county. No record of any such project, no permits. In fact, it was illegal to even post those signs. At the next meeting, under the sticky orange-pink sky, Karen went on about accessibility and temporary grants to private properties with historic shoreline connections, all nonsense, but it sounded official. I waited until she was done, then dropped my evidence on the table. Screenshots of old HOA meeting minutes, a statement from the developer, and the county's response to her fake project. By the time I finished, the board was murmuring. They voted to table her motion. Karen's mask slipped for a moment, rage panic, before she stormed out, crab cakes and all. But the battle wasn't over. The next morning, I got a thick, glossy letter on HOA stationery announcing an emergency bylaw amendment redefining access rights based on visual proximity to public spaces. Basically, if you could see the beach from your porch, Karen wanted the HOA to have a say in what you did. Voting was digital secret and surprise rigged. Karen's IT buddy had tweaked the system to allow proxy votes for unresponsive residents. Most didn't even know a vote was happening. I spent 3 days going door to door explaining what was really going on. Most neighbors were shocked. Some admitted they just assumed it was a clarification vote and planned to ignore it. Others, Karen loyalists, were harder to crack, but I started to turn the tide. We organized a town hall at the old firehouse outside of official HOA channels. I laid out everything: the manipulated votes, Karen's sketchy past, the fake beautification initiative. That's when the real twist hit. David, one of Karen's guests from that first chaotic Saturday, stood up. He said he worked for the state property registrar and had checked the records out of curiosity. Not only was my property never part of the HOA, but he'd draft a statement to prove it. The room exploded. By the end of the night, we had 24 signatures demanding a suspension of the vote and a neutral review. Karen doubled down, emailing claims that she was the victim of a smear campaign, and someone filed an anonymous zoning complaint about my deck. The county shut it down immediately, tracing it right back to the HOA admin login. Then Paul showed up with a flash drive from the IT guy logs showing proxy votes were cast without consent. The final meeting was packed. Karen tried to frame herself as misunderstood, but I stood up and asked 3 questions about the proxy votes, the fake beautification project, and the influencer guests she'd sicked on my property. Victor, the legal mediator, laid out the evidence. Motions were passed: freeze all amendments, suspend Karen as acting president, pending review. She stood there, the room silent, then stormed out, her power crumbling. Days later, Linda, the treasurer, came to my door. She brought receipts, HOA funds used for Karen's events flyers, and payments to her friend's contracting company for bogus assessments. Elliot, our new interim president, called for an emergency session with outside auditors. Their findings were brutal vote tampering, bylaw manipulation, misuse of funds. Karen vanished overnight. No applause, just a deep breath like poison leaving the air. Afterward, we held a neighborhood barbecue on the beach. No speeches, no agendas, just real people, real food, laughter, and for the first time in months, peace. As the sun set, Paul handed me a cold soda and joked about finally putting up that hammock. For a moment, it really felt like we'd made it back to normal. But on Monday, a black car pulled up, state regulators here to audit the entire HOA after someone tipped them off. There would be interviews, reforms, maybe even penalties. And honestly, it felt right. It wasn't just Karen, it was the whole system that had let her operate unchecked. Weeks passed, the quiet returned. Elliot settled in as caretaker, not king. People shared muffins, gossiped, borrowed ladders. No more surprise votes, no more drama. Then one morning, a delivery van brought me a plaque, nothing fancy, just private, not for HOA guests. I fixed it to my gate, a line drawn with clarity, not anger. A few days later, Paul dropped off the final state report. The cabin was officially legally outside all HOA authority. Karen could return in a wig and sunglasses, but the law was finally on my side. That weekend, we gathered Paul, Linda, Elliot, even David the registrar, and shared seafood folding chairs and a sigh of relief. But you know what? The story doesn't really end. A new sign went up on the HOA board this time, just a handwritten note from Elliot. Thank you for your patience. Real change takes time. The rest is up to us. Somebody taped a photo of my plaque underneath. I never found out who. Didn't need to. Some victories don't need fireworks. They're just about waking up, walking outside, and knowing the fight's finally over. At least for now. So what do you think? Did the neighborhood win, or is it just round one in a never-ending battle between community and control? Drop your thoughts below about right and wrong, about justice and power. I'll be on my porch listening to the waves, finally at peace.